Goedemiddag allemaal! There you go. After 8 years, that's the only Dutch I have. But it's not too bad, right? Not too bad. Welcome. Welcome to the Moonshots Podcast. How is Amsterdam this afternoon? See, you think I've already been drinking a few beertjes. I don't even know if it's morning or afternoon. Welcome. Are you feeling good? Are we ready to do some thinking, some investigating? Are we ready to expand our minds? Yes. Or do we just want to drink the beer? Also, okay. Well, a very fine welcome to all of you to episode 14 of the Moonshots Podcast. And as usual, I am joined by the man with a plan, usually behind the camera. But today, he's in front of the camera. Would you all give it up for Mr. Chad Owen?
Hello, Amsterdam.
So, if any of you got to see our preview broadcast yesterday, I had a great moment with Chad. And I asked him if he'd been to a cafe in Amsterdam. To which he answered, yes, I had a very nice breakfast at the cafe. But I said, did you go to one of the real Amsterdam brown cafes? And he had no idea what happens in a brown, dark cafe in Amsterdam. So he needs you. He needs your education, your advice on how to find the very best of Amsterdam. And maybe not only some of the shiny tourist spots, but maybe some of the more earthier, real...
Off the beaten path.
Off the beaten path, yeah. As they say. So we have a lot to do here on the show today, Chad. We've got some amazing guests that we're going to talk about in a second. We have so much to share, but I think we've got to do a few shout-outs. First, for a disclaimer, this is our first video live broadcast. So when we thought to ourselves, let's go live and do it in video as well. So we are welcoming upon us all of the variables that you get when you do a live broadcast for the first time. Now, you might be thinking, if this is a live video broadcast, where is the camera? In fact, the camera is right here in front of us. And it's doing all sorts of groovy technology, right, Chad? It's like zooming in on us. It's quite a high-tech production, right?
Yeah, I'm actually controlling them from my phone right here. It's quite a neat little app. We've got a nice two-shot here, going to a wide shot, and a close-up on you right now, Mike.
Oh. There you go. So, first of all, we've got to do some shout-outs. So I'm looking, where's Tiago in the audience? Tiago, who's watching us live from Brazil?
My wife, Priscilla.
The wife is in Brazil, so we're sending out big shout-out to Brazil. I also know that my friends and colleagues in Bucharest were up on a big widescreen in the office, and there's like 200 engineers in Bucharest right now. They've put the laptops down, and they're cheering for us here in Amsterdam. So give it up for Bucharest and Brazil.
I think I have some fellow New Yorkers also. It's about 9 a.m. They're just now waking up after their food comas from Thanksgiving, or they're trampling over people at Walmart for Black Friday, one of the two.
Or doing all at the same time.
Or doing all of it, yeah, exactly.
So we are all quite fancy and high-tech this afternoon. We've got live stream with people coming in and chatting with us. But I should come to my next disclaimer, and that is this is not a relax kind of a session for the next 1.5 hours. So I think we need to warn this audience that they've actually got some work to do.
Yeah, I'm coming out with the mic a little bit later and asking you guys, I'm asking you questions, so be prepared.
Hear that sound? Hear that sound? That's the what's he going to do? And yes, he is from Brooklyn, so you might be expecting him to be kicking the Adidas and dropping some rhymes, but actually what he'll be doing with his mic is he's going to be coming to you, our audience. He's going to be looking online, reading questions from our audience. And here's the thing. We're going to have these great entrepreneurs, these great innovators on stage with us. And Chad and I, we really get the easy job. We're going to ask a few questions, try and learn as much as we can from these 4 fine gentlemen. But we're going to ask you, the audience, to wrap it all up and tell us what we have learned from them. So rather than us doing the post-mortem, It will be you, the audience, that's going to help us decode all their secrets to success. So you better make sure those glasses are full because you're going to have work to do. Are you guys up for some insights and tough questions? Oh, Chad.
I don't think they
what
are.
Just happened?
Yeah.
We had such good energy at the start. What's the audience online doing? Oh, they're all gone. Yeah, they're all gone. Do you think we could get them all back? You think?
Yeah.
Okay. So guys, are you ready to tune in and learn from some masters of innovation here in Amsterdam? Yeah! All right. Okay. So that brings us to our first guest. This is someone it's really special for me to invite on stage. Because he protected all of you good Dutch citizens from receiving badly formatted emails from me when I was working in this advertising agency, sending out creative messages to the world. It was his technology that we used some 15, 16 years ago when I worked at McCann Erickson. So I'm really, really proud and really very happy to introduce you someone who has not only founded a lot of companies, he's not only sold companies, but he now invests in companies. So I am very excited to welcome to the stage Mr. Johan van Mil.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, and goedemiddag, as they would say.
Goedemiddag.
Very good. Now, before we get into the serious innovation and entrepreneurial questions.
Well, Johan was actually about to recommend a brown cafe to me, so before we got on stage. So what's your recommendation?
I think where you should go is to a cafe called In den Aapjen in Dutch. So in the ape.
It seems like a few people know that one in the audience.
Yes. We have gone there already. The show's only been going half an hour.
This man is having a big confession that he's laughing, so that's good. But what I mean is, In den Aapje is one of the oldest bars in Amsterdam. It's really funny because that's a big dierentuin, a zoo in Amsterdam, and which was built especially from apes coming from sailors, which arrived in Amsterdam, and when they came to a bar, they could sleep, and they were paying with their apes, which they brought from abroad.
They would pay with monkeys.
They paid with monkeys, and with the monkeys, they started the zoo. And it's a really beautiful story. It's one of the oldest bars. It's at the Zeedijk, near the central station. You should go there, Chad. Really, you would love it.
Okay, that one's for the list. Now we have another very important announcement. As you all know, and we have a global audience. I'm going to see if Chad can see if we have any Australian viewers who are definitely either a few beertjes in, as they would say, or already onto the espressos. It's like 1:30 in the morning. We couldn't pick a time zone to make everybody happy, but we do have this global audience, and we thought it only appropriate that we introduce the world to the very sophisticated culinary delights of the Netherlands. So Johan, in front of you, you might see a few food items that are familiar. Now, for our global audience, and for those of you here in Amsterdam who can't see what we have in front of us, we have the speculaas. Okay. Now the speculaas is sort of a spicy, biscuity. And would you say that's a kind of only a Christmas thing, Johan, or is that kind of something you can have all year round?
My kids eat it all year round.
All
so
year,
it's really
okay. So this is kind of a spicy, fun one. We have over here the pepernoten. Now that one's definitely a Christmas one. Okay?
Yeah, Santa Claus. It is. Yeah.
We have over here, this one is called the Thai.
Yeah, Thai.
Yeah. Now this is like a chewy, doughy kind of an experience. Okay.
Yeah.
So here we've got our three highly sophisticated Dutch delicacies. Okay. Known worldwide.
Dropjes.
But then we have probably a national favorite, huh?
Sure.
The dropje.
Dropje.
Tell us, what is the dropje?
Yeah, dropje is you can have it in different flavors. You know, you can have it in sweet and salt. You can have it in hard and soft form. I love it. I always have a bag in my car eating it.
Would you say in Dutch, jij bent een echte Nederlander?
Ik ben een echte verslaafde.
Oh. Now, but the big question is sweet or salty with your...
Sweet.
Yeah,
I prefer sweet. Sweet and soft. That's
okay.
Really,
So each of our guests are going to be invited to nominate their favorite Dutch treat. But you get to go first. So you have a whole selection here. Tell us, Johan, if you have to pick one of your favorites here. I think you've given us the clue.
What should I try first?
Yeah, what should Chad try first?
Dropjes.
Dropjes.
All right, dropjes
Yeah.
it is.
Okay, here we go. So Chad's going his first dropjes. Salty. Did you get salty?
Licorice.
Yeah, licorice it is. Now let's just have a look at the audience. Let's see by a show of hands, who else here, all these good Dutchmen and Dutch ladies, who else here would put the dropje, out of the four, who puts the dropje as their favorite Dutch treat? Let's have a look. Oh, yes. Yeah. And sweet or salty? What do we... Ooh.
That's about 1/5 of the audience.
Yeah. So there's still a good chance for the cookies, actually.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have the dropje. So stay tuned, particularly for our global listeners. Stay tuned because we'll be not only introducing dropjes, cookies, and all sorts of good things. We've got lots of great entrepreneurs and innovators that we're going to be interviewing. But I think it's about time we put some questions towards Johan. What do you think? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Chad's just nodding because he's in dropje heaven.
I'm busy eating a dropje.
Dropje heaven? Okay. Okay, so the first question that we have for you, Johan, is you've built companies and now you're investing in other people's companies. Tell us how you have had to shift and how you've had to grow from being that hardworking entrepreneur trying to make a vision come about. And how have you been able to transition now into helping others build their companies?
Yeah, good question. I started become an entrepreneur already when I was a student. So I built a few companies, also as a student and also afterwards. And then I learned that having a company is great, but managing people is not so great. And so I'm very good in, thinking about ideas, creating companies, building companies, when there are 10, 20 people max. But afterwards, it became a pain for me, really, to be honest with you. So I was always in the problem of starting a company, working my butt off to get it successful, but then I fell into the fall of that the company was too big, so I couldn't manage it myself. So I think 10 years ago I realized, I have to do something, I have to switch my career more or less. So then I found some friends who also had that same problem more or less, and also had a little bit of money. And we said, well, let's put that money in one basket and let's invest in other companies and let's learn how it works. And that was 10 years ago. And 10 years ago, there were not so many VCs in the Netherlands as there were, for example, in the US. So I think there were 10 roughly. And we did this by gut feel. And we talked to different companies, put sometimes our money in, sometimes we didn't. And we did 3 investments with the guys. And it turned out pretty successful. We sold to listed companies. So that means in VC land, for the audience, that you're doing pretty good. And one was bought back to the team, and that means in VC land that's not very good. So we had a pretty good return, and then we founded a new fund. And then I think 2.5 years ago, when I was selling my last company, I was thinking, what shall I do with my life? Shall I start my 12th company, or shall I...
Whoa. Are you joking on the number 12, or are you for real?
That's for real, yeah.
12 companies.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to come back to that. Okay, so you're at the last one.
Yeah, last one, yeah.
Okay, you've sold it off, and you went through a transition, obviously.
And then I went to a transition because I realized that the problem I was falling into every time, starting a company, becoming too big, etc., that I had to really shift that. That's one, and that I liked helping other companies, coaching people, thinking about new ideas, etc. And then at that time, I was moving out of Amsterdam because we live pretty nearby each other. And then I moved outside Amsterdam into a natural forest area, so really outside. And I realized, I don't want to travel all into the city again at 9 a.m. in the traffic, etc. Yeah. And I want to spend also more time with my kids. So I was looking for a new way of, getting direction, helping me in life and finding new ways to work on. And then 2.5 years, so I full-time made the switch from being an entrepreneur to being an investor. And since that I'm doing that, and it's great. I think it's very good. What I like in my job is you meet all kind of people. Yeah. You meet entrepreneurs. It gives a lot of energy. It's great to have them on the table and discuss their issues. And the hardest part for me is as an entrepreneur, I always see where it goes well and what needs to be changed. And then, the big gap for me is that I step in and fix the problems myself. So that's one of the issues I'm constantly working on.
Okay. Yeah. So
Yeah, I have lots of questions
Yeah,
for
yeah,
you.
yeah. Okay, you go first. Come on.
Well, I think for me, what's your biggest takeaway from being an entrepreneur, having founded 11 companies? And how does that give you a new perspective to then look at a company and decide if it's worthy of investment or advisorship? What are you taking from your entrepreneurship and applying it to your investing?
Yeah, I think what the most important thing when you are an entrepreneur is having a complete 1000% focus on what you're doing, and work day and night to realize that company. I think if you don't do that, you will not succeed. And that was, when I started my first company roughly 25 years ago. I think it's the same now, and it's even harder because the competition, especially with the tech, and it's easy to build a company. You don't need an office. You have WeWork. You don't need a car. You have the Uber, the car2go's, etc. So it's very easy to start a company. But I think so. It's really hard. It's really hard to have a successful company, and then it's really important that you work hard, but also work smart. So I think that's what I take as an entrepreneur. And sorry, your second question, Chet, was?
Well, really, I'm asking, I don't know if there's any Dutch entrepreneurs here, what should they be doing to interest someone like you to then become, an advisor or an investor in their company?
Yeah, and what is it, to build on that, when now you're looking, if you imagine there was all these prospective startups in front of you, take us into your mind, what are you actually looking for? You must have some sort of checklist.
Yeah, we do have a checklist. We call it internally, we call it the T-score. And every company we talk to and every guy I ran to, if it's at a funeral, because sometimes people really pitch at a funeral.
Hang on, you've been pitched at a funeral?
Yeah, that's a long story.
It's a long and sad story by the sound of it.
And we use more or less a model that we distracted from the 15 companies we invested in already. And I think we saw roughly, 2,000 business plans and entrepreneurs, etc. And what we are looking for is what we call the T-score, and it's derived from one, what is the team like, the team. 2 is what is the traction, and 3 is what is the thesis of the company. So what's really the problem they are solving, what's the market they are tackling, how scalable it is. Yeah. So we constantly look at these 3 when we evaluate an opportunity or in whatever phase it is, and then we derive from that what we're going to do with that company. So it's a really structured way of working, and otherwise I think that's the smart part, it's working hard, but it's also working smart. I mean, if we don't do that, we get, as you can imagine, a lot of business plans coming, being sent in, and we get approached a lot of times. It's very good to be very specific in the time what you spend on each company, because if you don't do that as an investor, I mean, time is our biggest asset that we have. Yeah,
and you can't buy time.
You can't buy time, still.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to go back. I know what's really interesting for the audience here and the audience listening live online is there's a lot of people who are trying to make a breakthrough professionally, with a business idea, with a product, but it's often mirrored by a personal breakthrough at the same time. I want you to take us back to this big transition. Obviously, you said, I'm out of the city, I'm heading to the forest. Yeah. Okay. How did you make this transition? How did you invite this change into your life? And what advice would you give to anyone who's trying to go through that? Imagine that someone might, in fact, be working at a company, but working on their own idea, and they're trying to, they've got a dream of a startup, or they just want to see something great come about in the world. How did you invite this change? Take us through what you actually did.
Yeah, the best way perhaps is compare it to the different stages that you have as a startup. You have the idea phase, you have the MVP phase, the product market fit phase, and the scaling phase. And when I moved out of the city, perhaps that's a good example because it's more in the private level instead of as a business. Then I had the idea of moving outside. My girlfriend, she was she wanted to play, to stay in the city, and I really wanted to move outside. So we had discussions, years about moving out of the city, but she wouldn't do it. And at a certain moment, I realized, being an investor and working with those 4 stages, I realized I had to build an MVP for this situation. So I said to my wife at that time, my girlfriend, I said to her, well, perhaps we should try to lift. We started a project called Proefwonen. Okay. So we started to rent via Airbnb houses outside Amsterdam, just a week to feel how it was living somewhere. So we rented a house everywhere around Amsterdam, half an hour maximum away from Amsterdam. So we started living, me, my wife, and also our 2 kids, and how it was, living there. So
you, if I just understand that, rather than just kind of being in a somewhat abstracted life, thinking about some big move, which would feel very dramatic if you've lived in the city all your life, and then you're going to make this radical change. So you kind of did a test and learn. Let's create an MVP and see if anyone wants it. Yeah.
And then we did it, I think, 7 or 8 times. So we did it at a great location, but also at a very boring location. So we learned what we want, and we adapted our view also on that. And then at a certain time we agreed on, moving out of town, and then we bought a house somewhere and we started living somewhere. So I think if you use that also for your personal life, and if you have an idea as an entrepreneur, because I meet a lot of people who have an idea and cannot make the real decision about starting the company, it's just one. I think the first phase is create an MVP, test how it works. So spend one day of your work, one day of the week, or build a small thing, or test a campaign or Facebook and see how people react. Just create an MVP, create a test for yourself, and get some proof and get some validation from yourself, but also from the market how it works. And then the step doing that is pretty easy. And what I see a lot is that people hang in the phase more or less about thinking about the idea and having that wish, but not doing the real step.
Okay, so just to unpack that a little bit, that sounds to me like once you actually started testing the idea, much like you might do even in a startup, that actually made the transition much easier. Yeah. Did you find that was also a source of the commitment from your better half? Once you had done some testing and learning, it wasn't so much a sell anymore. Yeah, you had really done it, and so the evidence was perhaps clear.
You buy it.
Yeah, okay. So that's a big change that you've invited. You've gone from building, you saw on the horizon your 12th company. Look, I've known you a long time, but I didn't realize it was that many companies.
Yeah.
One thing I'm actually really interested in, I have one company that I'm still operating. How in the world did you find the time to found so many companies? And I'm curious just kind of your day-to-day process for thinking about both the higher level of how the company is doing, but then your brain is probably already on to the next idea, right? So how are you kind of taking care of what's happening now and then also planning for your future ventures at that time?
Yeah, that's a big risk for me, of course, because I'm always planning ahead. And what I do is, if I have an idea, when we started Peak Capital and also now our next fund, I have a visualization of how it becomes, and then I worked towards that visualization, and I work, then day and night in realizing, and that's the way I do it. And that's also my big pitfall, of course, that I have to step back sometimes and realize what's happening, etc. So I think that's one. And the second one is, I think what's very important, that I always find great people to work with, because I can never have 12 companies on my own. So I always have great partners who I work with and to cooperate with. Because, for example, when we invest, we never invest, for example, in single founder companies. Right. Because having a company, especially these days, requires so much skills that you cannot do that on your own. So, I think
one thing we found in unpacking all the great entrepreneurs on the Moonshots podcast is they all build teams around them to execute their ideas. Whether it's someone like Jeff Bezos, who builds a team for one singular product vision like Amazon, or someone like Elon Musk that builds multiple teams for multiple companies, SpaceX and Tesla, the Boring Company, etc.
Yeah. And what I mean is building a team, that's one, but also getting a co-founder, so on the same level as you both are, to work with you. And then, if you have a co-founder, you don't give him, for example, 5% of the shares, because that's not a co-founder. No. But then you do, when you are 3 guys and you have 33%. And if that guy is not good enough, then you have to replace him. Pretty easy. So also make that tough decisions in that phase. That's crucial, I think.
Getting people to put skin in the game together.
Yeah.
So let's get into a little bit of how you coach and mentor others. That must be a huge part of your day, because you tell us a little bit about the portfolio, how big is it, and give us a sense of the sort of engagement you've got with founders right now.
Yeah, good question. We invest money, but also our own experience, and we help these companies on a day-to-day business. So we invested currently we invested in 15 companies. We sold 3. We're currently closing a deal, and so we have a lot of companies still to manage.
Yeah.
What we do is we manage those companies actively. So that means, when we invest in a company, we make a plan roughly for the 3 months ahead, because that's the most important period when we put our money in, that it grows faster than it did before. So we have to hire people, etc. So then we are involved, on a. I think we speak to these founders, once or two times a week. We meet them, so really very intensive. And after 3 months, then it will become less, and then it's we go to a weekly meeting or bi-weekly, etc. So we are very active with the founders, and it means for my role that I'm very active as a more or less a co-founder with the companies. So I have calls and meetings and all day about new funding rounds, potential buyers. The CMO they want to hire, everything we help them, and also with the network that we have, and also the things, of course, that we learned ourselves as entrepreneur.
So if you were to abstract across those 15 companies, what is the toughest thing your founders in the portfolio, what's the toughest thing that they have? They're all relatively early stage companies. What's the thing that they struggle with the most? And tell us a little bit about what advice you have for them to solve that.
I think the biggest struggle is that they have, especially the companies we invest in, is that they are, most of the time, they are so-called bootstrapped companies. So they funded them by themselves. And then running a company is more or less running your cash flow.
Yeah.
Because the speed that your company grows is derived from the cash that you have. And when we put in money, and that's roughly $500,000 until 1.5 million, then we have to speed up the process and change that thinking with that founder. I think that's the hardest part in our job. So
is that because you feel that the stakes got a lot bigger, the risks feel much bigger? Is that what the...
No, that's one, but I think the most important one is that they have to work a different way than they did before. So if they hire a guy, then normally they would really check the salary. They have to get the cheapest guy which is on the market. Yeah. And when we get on board, we want the best guy on the market. And if we have to pay him twice as much, then we are willing to do that, because we know from our own experience that he speeds the process of 10x. Success 10x. Yeah. So it's a good investment.
Yeah.
And that thinking, that change in thinking, I think that's the hardest part in our job, but that's what we discuss a lot with.
To go from someone that's been bootstrapping the whole time to now I actually have resources.
Yeah.
How? So just in a follow-up to that, how do you actually help them have a sort of a huge paradigm shift? Because that's, I can imagine if you're incredibly proud and you've built it, you've bootstrapped your way there, and then all of a sudden some guy's walking in and say, spend the money, go for it, real quick. And I mean, this is sort of very disruptive to yourself and to all the sort of playbooks that you have. How do you create this change for them?
Yeah, I think it's building a relation, that's one. So when we invest in a company, normally it takes, from the first meeting that we have to closing a deal, it takes 4 to 6 months. And in the 4 to 6 months, we really get to know the guys that we invest in. And we meet them. We meet even their wives, so we have dinner at their homes with their kids, nice. Giving them a lot of drinks so that we see them in a human behavior, at a home behavior. But really getting to know them. Hang on.
So we should tell anyone, whenever you ask to have dinner at someone's house, the good news, he's thinking about investing. The bad news, he's going to get you really drunk. I just want to make sure.
They get drunk.
Okay, they get drunk. Now you should really be worried.
Yeah.
So I think that's very important. So build trust, build a relationship, and during that phase, during the 4 to 6 months.
But Johan, how do you get him going from A to B? Like, how do you shift them along? You've got the relationship, so they're now maybe a little bit open to this. Yeah. But what is the device that you use to help them get we should hire that top guy?
I think that's in talks, that's in analyzing the data, that's looking at the company, helping them during the investment phase also. So before we invest, also helping them, getting them to learn other people, to learn from their mistakes, etc. Yeah. So there's really talking, showing things, learning things, giving them insight in their own business, because we analyze the data that they have in their company often better than they do themselves. So that brings us also the realization that it has a lot of opportunity, but they have to really speed up because the competition is growing, for example, much faster as they are, etc. Yeah. So I think giving them the insights, and first is building the relation, and the third one is a plan how to execute it.
Okay.
And that's the 3-month plan that we work with companies on when we invest. Okay. And then really execute that plan.
So you essentially go from invest. There's a couple of key milestones. You invest. Or does the dinner at their house with the kids and the wine, does that happen before the investment? I think that does.
Always.
Always before the investment. Okay. Then you have the aha moment, and then you try and shift them into this highly accelerated situation where their whole tempo, the whole rhythm of the business is transformed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct.
Wow.
Wow.
I want to get him over for dinner just so I can
Yeah,
see what this
exactly.
transformation looks
I'll
like.
invite him to the.
I got you
to
drunk.
the-
Yeah. Come to Sydney, okay?
I'll invite him to the Brown Cafe.
There
Yeah.
you go, with the apes. Okay, so we're about to go wandering into the audience for some post-game analysis. So a bit of a warning here to the audience with us in Amsterdam. We're going to need your help to decode what we just learned from Johan. And I want to take this moment to thank you for inviting us into this world. I feel like there's a whole world to talk about what happens after the 3-month acceleration. And so maybe in the next time we come here, we can talk about what happens there and getting all the way to those golden moments on the first 3, which is when you sell the company.
Great plan.
Okay, all right. Chad is
just
going freestyle.
Someone in the audience, at the Moonshots Podcast, we're all about decoding what great entrepreneurs and innovators are doing. And so I'm actually just curious, someone in the audience, what's kind of your biggest takeaway or learning from our conversation here with Johan?
Get ready to share. Come on, folks. I'm looking for those arm raises. There's one.
Okay,
Okay.
One person was entertained.
Let's make sure you introduce the individual, the talent at the back.
Hello, I'm Maaike. Test and learn. It's always test and learn. So it was really a reminder for me. Just do things and not think too much, but just experience. So that's something I take.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Test and learn. Now, for everybody, the test and learn theme has come back a lot for us. You will be amazed at how many people have ideas that have never been tested, or when they finally, and I actually don't think a lot of people even get to actually truly creating a test or an experiment. The amazing thing is the aha moments you get when you actually put the product in front of a customer, and it can just be like a prototype. It doesn't even have to be a full-fledged, shiny product.
It can be Airbnbs outside the city.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the big thing that you've reminded me of is actually this test and learn philosophy of prototyping your ideas doesn't only live in your professional life. So I was really inspired to see how you took thinking from your work as an investor, and you just took it into your personal life. And actually, you had a transformation, not with your co-founder, so to speak, right? Yeah. And she was not necessarily so excited about going to the forest, but through the testing and learning, you kind of got there. So that's a great reminder for me, is that things that can work in the office, ideas for how you can improve things are not necessarily siloed, but they can cohabitate in your personal life as well. Fantastic. And thank you to our first insight giver. Mm-hmm. Thumbs up. Okay, everybody, would you please show your appreciation for Mr. Johan Vermeulen?
And stick around. We have 3 more amazing entrepreneurs and innovators from right here in Amsterdam. Mike, do you want to...
Yes, but hang on. We also have lots of Dutch treats as well.
Yes,
so.
I still have lots more. Hopefully this plate is empty by the end.
Whoa, easy. Okay, we might need some crowd audience help as well. Okay, so that's the first of our guests. We're going to move into our second guest now. And what's really interesting is we're now going to kind of go deeper into the world of coaching and mentoring, systems and habits. We're going to talk to, and this is, as I said to Chad yesterday, this is a great adventure in understanding Dutch names. So our next guest is a coach and a mentor at GoFastForward. And so he spends a lot of time actually transforming entrepreneurs who are trying to build a business and take it to the next level. And I think we've got lots of systems and ideas that will be helpful for all of us in this next interview. So everybody here and online, will you please welcome to the stage Mr. Maarten van Montfoort. Okay, Maarten, you are like a coach of entrepreneurs.
You think so? Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, I wanted to pick up on some of the themes that Johan was touching on. Yeah. Johan was talking about like founders have bootstrapped their company and then all of a sudden the world changes. There's capital, but then what's interesting is there's also expectation. That's the big thing that comes with capital. And so everything starts to change. Now, I would love for you to tell us a little bit about when you meet entrepreneurs at the start of your coaching program. Take us through a little bit where they're at and the transformation of where they get to after they've been working with you.
Yeah. So the GoFastForward program is meant for scale-ups. So companies with at least €1 million in revenue. So they're already serious companies. Have a good proposition, have a good product, have some customers, have an organization, but want to make the next step. And I think starting a company is one, but really growing the company is even more difficult. And the companies we talk to and the entrepreneurs that we are coaching really would like to make the next step. And I think in essence, there's a lot of theory, but my role is also to introduce best practices. I've been an entrepreneur since 2004. I have a lot of experiences, and I can share those experiences with all the other entrepreneurs, and also make them prevent not making the same mistakes that I made, for example. But I think in this world where you can really share your knowledge and expertise, that can help make them the next step in their entrepreneur career.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm curious, in your mind, what's one of the biggest thing that is holding a company and an entrepreneur back from going, like you said, from 1 million, say, to 10 million? And how do they get that 10x company, grow to 10 million and then hopefully grow to 100 million? What's one thing that you've seen that's been holding them back?
Well, there's a couple of things, and I think Johan already addressed some of them as well. I think first, you really need to have a clear plan, right? You need to have the big goal, and you need to live it every day, right? You need to have a good plan, write it down, visualize it, and then live the plan. And make sure that every day when you're in the office, when you work with the people, live the plan, stick to the plan.
Do you often meet founders that have done fine, but are actually missing this plan? I mean, how often is that missing from the equation when you meet people?
Yeah, so there is not a clear plan, or they have several plans, so they don't stick to one plan.
Okay, is that common too? Like just wanting to like boil the ocean, as we'd say?
Yeah, well, I think if you talk to entrepreneurs, we always see multiple opportunities at the same time.
Right. Okay.
So most of the time we get distracted. And I think Johan also mentioned focus. I think what is really important if you want to grow the business is you need to be focused. And you really need to focus on what you're good at, because most of the time that's what you really like doing. And you should focus on that. And the things you're not good at, try to find other people to take care of it. For example, manage the company if you really want to be the innovator or thinking of new ideas. So I think that's one. And then also having the right mindset. So making sure that everybody is aligned, that you have a great team. And then challenge each other on a day-to-day basis.
Okay, well, so that's a lot of good stuff there.
Yeah.
Hang on. Whoa. So let's start with that last one, the challenging of each other. One of the things that I see is that founding teams and management teams often have all the best intentions, right? But constructive conversation or even deliberate polarized argumentation to find the best path is something I see a lot of people struggling with. Yeah. They don't know how to like say, no, that's a crazy idea, or that's it. What advice do you have for people that can't have healthy debate, conversation around what the business should do? Like, imagine we're stuck there now. We can't have the right conversation. What advice do you have?
Well, I think if you're running a company and when you're in working with business partners, it's like being in a marriage, right? And we all know that within a marriage, it's all about communication, right? If you can't be open and transparent, of course, then you probably end up in all kind of discussions, or there's no communication. So, first of all, you need to create that level of accountability, and of course, a plan can help with that, because if you already have a plan, then you can hold each other accountable. Say, hey, this is the direction, this is our vision as a company, and you're not following the vision, you're not doing what we agreed upon.
So what's harder for people, to have the sense of accountability or the act of holding each other accountable? So is it that everybody knows you should be doing a thing, but nobody can really call you out on it? Tell us where it really breaks down.
I think a lot of people find it difficult,
Right.
to hold one
Yeah.
another accountable. But if you really want to grow the company, that's something you really need to have.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's say Chad and I were struggling with accountability. How do you help us keep each other accountable? Like, tell us some of the systems or practices that you help these founders put in place.
Yeah, well, I always use some of my experiences, and just to give you an example, I started my company with 3 founders, but after a couple of years, it didn't feel right anymore because it felt like that not everybody was working that hard or was bringing that entrepreneurial spirit at the table, and then I thought, oh, I can just maybe look at it for a while and then see what happens, and then I thought, no, I just need to speak up. And
How did you do it? Take us to the moment.
just invited them in for a coffee and expressed how I felt.
Okay.
And at that same time, one of the guys said, well, I'm almost waiting for 1.5 years for this discussion, but I never wanted to start a discussion. So sometimes when you have that gut feeling, you need to express it because some of the other party or your other colleagues, your other business partners have the same feeling. So,
so
speak up is my advice.
Yeah, don't leave things unsaid.
Yes.
Yeah, but isn't it amazing to think when Maarten finally shared how he felt, that one of your co-founders was sitting on this for a year and a half?
Yeah.
But how powerful is it that you could find a way of communicating it? Now, often these conversations are hard because of the conflict and the misinterpretation that comes from these kind of discussions. How can I have those discussions? How can our listeners have those discussions without it ending up in a arm wrestle and boxing fight?
Yeah, well, of course, I think that you need to have the rhythm of the business, right? You need to have the weekly, the monthly catch-ups, because what I often see is that those meetings, when you really take the time to sit together, look at the strategy, look at the vision of the company, because it's busy, there's a lot of other things to worry about, then those meetings will disappear from the calendar. Those are the first ones. And I think those are one of the most important ones. Take the time to evaluate on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, what's going on within the company, how do you feel? And then, of course, if you do that on a regular basis, things don't stay unsaid for a year. Right?
So
because you have the pressure to speak up.
Yeah, it sounds like it's not just on the business, but actually how you're feeling as one of the founders as well.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not as interested in the business now, or, hey guys, I want to run, and you guys are not moving as fast enough.
So let's now go to the audience. I want to do a show of hands here. Who here in their jobs experiences moments where you feel things, right, but you don't always say things? When are there, show of hands, I'm going to put my hand up.
That's pretty much everyone in the room.
So you've got good counsel for all these people. And I think what's really interesting about what you said is it's so true, isn't it? That when you get busy, the first thing to go with is, the regular MT meeting, we'll just skip that this week, too busy, right? But it sounds like what you're saying, that ritual of being together and expressing, that kind of helps.
Yeah.
Now, when you work with these founders, are they choosing to sign up with you? They're all coming to you ready, willing to take on the world and to go from 1 million to 10 million? Is that generally where they're at?
Yeah, so when they sign up for the program, and I'm just one of the mentors or speakers during the program, they pay a serious amount of money for it, right?
Okay.
So they're all highly motivated, and everybody in that class is really want to take their company to the next level as well.
Okay.
So it's different kind of companies, different type of entrepreneurs, but they're all in there to learn from each other and to learn from the guest speakers and as well.
So what are the common challenges that you have for founders when they're highly motivated? We've talked about having a clear plan, and often what I call part-time entrepreneurs or bedtime entrepreneurs who have lots of ideas but never actually do anything. But this is very different. These are people that are highly motivated and doing things. What are the most common big problems that they have? It sounds like there's a lot of paradigm shifting that you need to do to get from that 1 to 10. It's not just about working harder.
Yeah. So I think one of the most commonly heard things and most discussed themes is people, right? So how do you attract the right people? and it's in particular in the current market situation where it's really difficult to get the right talents. I think everybody's struggling with that. And also, how do you keep people? How do you motivate them? That's something we always discuss. There's a great team which I'm also presenting around profit and cash management. I think when you
This is also what Johan was like the management of that capital and cash flow is critical.
Yeah, I think of course, because if you want to grow the company, you need cash.
Yeah.
We all know. We all know that, but since they are in the phase of growing, that's something that they all didn't give a lot of thought of, right? Because they were growing the company, thinking of the product and the people. But if you want to grow the business, you need profit and you need cash to do so. So that's a theme that we address as well, and where we get a lot of questions. So we try to give them some tools and some best practices, and also how they can create the right budgets and how they can stay in line with that as well.
Okay. I have a question for you just about Dutch and Amsterdam entrepreneurship. You know, I'm coming from New York, and I've spent a lot of time working with Mike in San Francisco when he was there. What do you feel like makes this people and country and culture a great place for entrepreneurs? Kind of what are some of the great, characteristics of entrepreneurs that you found here that are maybe uniquely Dutch or from people from Amsterdam?
Well, I traveled a lot in the last 12 months, and I found out that when I go to other countries, even close by, so in the Nordics or the UK, people really appreciate the fact that Dutch people are really direct, and sometimes we're maybe even a little bit blunt. But
Really?
Yeah. But yes is yes and no is no.
Yeah.
Right? So we're always really clear. We don't have a lot of excuses. Yeah. So I think that's one thing. And then also, if you look back at our history, although we're a real small country, as the size of the country, we have a lot of inhabitants. And I think for many, many decades ago, we already traveled the seas and tried to connect with other people to trade. So I think it's in our nature to connect with people and try to work with other cultures as well, and really be open. I think the fact that from I think the most basic grades in school, we are learning our kids to speak English as well.
That's right.
So we have that international mindset because our great ancestors already had to do it because we had to travel the seas.
Yeah.
So I think it's the combination of being really international, entrepreneurial with a trade mindset, and also just being direct and just say what you think. I think that's a good combination. Yeah.
I've been here less than 2 days, and I've been really blown away by just everyone here in Amsterdam. So kudos to all of you. I mean, how do you say it? Hollanders, Netherlanders, Nederlanders?
Nederlanders.
Nederlanders. Yeah.
Okay, now, so for me, a couple of key themes here. I think the trading history of Holland was, I still see that in the sort of open system that it feels like when you work with Dutch people, with Dutch companies. I would say we shouldn't forget how special the Netherlands is for innovation and business. The first stock exchange in history, the first company in history, the VOC, is that right? The VOC was. I actually lived in a Dutch East Indies company warehouse that used to store spices and ammunition, which was just really special. But what we have to realize that if you just think about the idea of a company as we know it now is largely what the VOC was, with shareholders and all these, and you got a notary for being part of the company, and then the stock exchange. And we all know the impact that the financial system has on the way in which we do business. But I think there's another thing. There's a very famous Dutch politician, Wim Kok. And if I remember it's right, he had this philosophy of the derde weg, the third way, of bringing people together. I think you will find that there are very few societies that are engineered for working together and overcoming the fact that it's very dense, very multicultural, but then you walk around and you enjoy such an incredible quality of life despite those conditions. And I just want to remind you, when you go to other countries that are jammed full of people, often that has a direct correlation with poverty, lack of infrastructure, but it's sort of the opposite here in the Netherlands. And you come to a city like Amsterdam, and I had to enforce a rule that Joost would remember, in order for me to learn Dutch, I had to ban the English
Yeah.
because everyone's language was so good here. Everyone was so willing to speak English. I was like, I'm never going to get anywhere with Dutch. But I was threatened. You might want to tell people about this. I was threatened with a week with the nunners in Voert.
Okay. That's tough.
That was
That's
a big
tough.
threat. Can you explain to our audience, particularly those that are online, what does that mean?
So in the southern part of the Netherlands, we have it's an old monastery, and if you really want to speak a foreign language, and you don't want to take a 1-year course, you can go to the monastery for 1 week, and there's no connection with the outer world. You're just in the monastery, and with the nuns, and they can teach you any language within 1 week. So especially if you want to live abroad, work abroad, and you're not familiar with a specific language, you can go in there and at least have the basic, right?
What do you think, guys? Next Moonshots podcast from Amsterdam, we send Chad
From
to
the
the nunners.
monastery, yeah.
As a filmmaker, you could probably make a documentary about it as well.
It sounds very interesting.
Actually, you'd be totally up for it. Okay, now before we let you go, Maarten, we forgot to ask you about which
I was
Dutch
looking forward to it.
which Dutch delicacy. So let me get up the list so I get all the names exactly correct.
Tai.
We got the tai tai,
Yeah.
Speculoos.
speculoos,
Yeah.
speculaas, yeah.
Pepernoten.
Hey, he doesn't need the nunners, I don't think.
Dropia.
Dropia, yeah.
Dropia.
Yeah. Okay, so help us out here, Maarten. Which is your pick?
So we already had the dropjes.
Yeah.
I really fancy them, but I think we spoke a little bit about Dutch heritage, right? About our past, and I think in particular this time of a year when we are celebrating Sinterklaas, which is a typical Dutch big event for the children. Of course, I have to pick the pepernoten because we only eat them from, let's say, early November until the 5th of December.
Good choice.
So it's a typical Dutch delicacy, and we only have it this time of year. So.
Okay, so the
Pepernoten it is.
Yeah. Okay, there we go. All right, so I feel like our boy from Brooklyn is going to jump out there into the audience again. So I want you to get your thinking caps on. And I see a number of Finsters drinking beer up the back there. I can see Walter is drinking beer, and RJ's drinking beer. So I'm sure they've got some good questions. So here's the thing. Chad's going to be looking for people who want to share the biggest learning or insight they had from listening to Maarten. So let's see some participation. Here we go.
Joost.
Second row and all.
Yeah, so I think it's...
First of all, hang on. Who are you? You have to introduce
So,
Who is this person?
hello everybody. Raise hands that don't know me yet. So I'm an advisor to the guys and the girls from moment one, and I'm very thrilled to be here. Feels like home. To my question, to the observation, I think it's all about transparency and honesty when it comes to the relationship between co-founders and management of the board kind of guys and girls. And what I still have as a question, but I don't know whether it's the stage.
Yeah, come on.
Is your role in facilitating that, and it's also one maybe towards Johan even later on over a beer, how to create an environment to stimulate that transparency, openness and honesty. I would be very curious to hear about your vision on that.
Yeah, well, it's a good question, and I think there's not just one answer to that as well. I think, in essence, it's all about trust, right? And I think, like I said early on in the interview, when you're in a company and you have a co-founder or a business partner or a co-owner, I think you should treat it as a marriage, right? And you need to have that same mindset because you spend most of the time a day working on that big goal is trying to grow the company as well. So you need to have that level of trust, right? You need to find it, and if there's no trust, then that's of course the first step you need to work on. I think a second thing that can be really, really helpful, of course, is get a mentor in. Don't do it by yourself. I think when I wanted to grow the company with one of the founders, when we really decided to go ahead, just the two of us, we brought in 2 mentors, right? Because we said, okay, we can't do it alone. We need some help from outside as well. So I always tell people it's about dare to ask, right? Dare to ask for advice. Mentors can be really, really helpful, especially if they're a little bit outside the business as well. these can be the guys, the women that can ask you all kind of nasty questions to challenge you. I think that's what you need to be challenged, right? That's really important.
So can I just, to make sure we capture this learning, you're saying that the impact of an external advisor is in the fact that they can have a little bit more freedom to ask tougher questions?
Yeah.
And do you think that's because they're not involved on a daily basis, so they don't have all the bias that comes with being an employee?
Yeah.
They have a little bit of distance to say, come on, that really wasn't great. And they're not scared of losing their job. It's just open feedback.
Yeah, and they are allowed to ask stupid questions because they're not part of the business, right?
Right.
And I think that is sometimes what we forget. Sometimes we are too focused. And it's good that people from the outside ask you all kind of other questions which you already have forgotten about.
Well, and what's really interesting between what both you and Johan are saying is there's this trading off between focus and perspective all the time.
Yeah.
And that sounds to me to be one of the greatest, and I'm looking at co-founders here who've been up all night finishing products, but having the ability to zoom out and zoom in and zoom out and shift between the different modalities that come with being a founder. That's why we love it. Maybe sometimes it's a little challenging.
Yeah. But we like a challenge.
We
right?
do.
Yeah.
We do. All right, everybody, would you please give it up for Maarten, the super coach.
Thank you.
Okay, I know we've got more and more guests arriving at the back, so people are welcome to join in the room and come on in. We're halfway through. Can I send you back out in the audience, Chad? Yeah, grab the mic. I want to go and ask, who's got some thoughts on this idea between focus and perspective? Who else here is finding that a big thing in their role? Focus, perspective. Who here is seeing that in their role? Let's have a look around here. Oh, there's a little hand raising going here. There's a little founder over here.
Don't forget to introduce yourself.
Yeah, introduce yourself.
My name is Dave,
Hey, Dave.
co-founder. Now, we have been building the Fin product, which we're going to look at later on today. And I think my perspective on the focus perspective thing would be mainly that if you are building one specific thing, it's very simple to get into a tunnel to only fix a certain element because you're working on it like every day. And it really helps to have other people around you, which we had, which was really helpful, to actually make sure you also get this other perspective on things. And it also really helps if you speak a lot to your clients, for example, because they also could be kind of mentors for the product that you built. So I think the balance is very interesting, how to continuously move between those two elements, because if you're only too much in the perspective part and working with a small team, you're not going to build a product either. So that's a bit, I think, the biggest challenge to solve.
Great. Thank you. Guys, give it up for Dave.
I love that idea of having clients as mentors, because then you can have that client and product focus.
Yeah.
But then you have people from outside the company that are giving you that feedback. Good idea, Dave.
Yeah. I really like that because we get very excited about our own ideas. There's actually a scientific process called the endowment effect, where we get so in love with our own ideas, we forget that end customers are not in love with our ideas at all. In fact, what's really interesting is that end users, consumers, they're endowed, they are very partial to something that we call the status quo. So whenever you propose a new product or service in the world, customers are instantly looking at the switching costs, the trade-off of what you're asking. So you have your shiny thing and you're like, woohoo, we got it. And you're absolutely convinced the world is going to love it. But actually the reality is that customers are not in love with it at all. In fact, you're even lucky to have their attention, the most scarce resource in the universe. You're lucky to have their attention for a brief second. And at that point that you do manage to get their attention, they're literally like, what's this going to cost me? Like, how much, like, what do I get? And like, how do I, if I do this, how much work is it going to be? So the classic thing is here, if you look at, you're an iPhone user, and I say to you, I have an Android phone that's really good, the first thing you're going to go, my contacts sync. Oh, they don't use iMessage. This is all what we call switching costs, okay? So there's always this trade-off going on. And so there's this philosophy, particularly in Silicon Valley, about 10x. And the reason that you will always find me yabba, 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 10x, this and that, is it's a very nice rule. You should make something 10 times better than today's solution. And it's actually proven. There's a guy, you can check it out on Google. His name's John Gornville at Harvard Business School. And he just spent his time studying the degrees of which, how many times better does a product actually need to be to launch successfully. And he actually, and this is a nice little secret that you won't know, he actually, in his study, found that it needs to be 9 times better. So he runs over to Google in the early 2000s, and he presents his work to them. And one of my old colleagues was in the audience. This is Tom Chi. And all these people are there, and he says, you've got to be 9 times better. And all the Google guys, and this is like Google X, you know, the guys that do all the moonshots, they were onto something. They do the moonshot stuff, and so John says, well, it needs to be 9 times better. And he looked at why all these companies had failed and technologies had failed, and he actually has a formula for why it should be 9 times. But the Google guys are like, 9x? It doesn't quite sound very good. So they just added a whole new factor and put it up to 10x. So all the founders out there, if you thought 9x was hard enough, Google just raised the bar to making it 10x. But there is a real truth in it, that switching costs are massive for users. So for all of the entrepreneurs in our audience, for all of the creators, all of the people that really want to do something great in the world, go on that mission, but you have to know this one thing, that as much as you love your product, your customer loves the status quo, loves it, hates change. So you need to come up with something that is so remarkable that it will have this attraction, that it's naturally so good at addressing a problem, but it's so much better than today that they will climb mountains to get to that area.
Yeah, I'm going to plug our very first episode of the Moonshots podcast on Elon Musk, because I think he embodies that 10x mindset. And if you just listen to him talk, you can hear everything that he does at all of his companies. He's thinking in X. So if we improve the efficiency of the motors with batteries 4x, then okay, we're closer to 10x. And then if we decrease the cost of the batteries by 2x, okay, so then we're at this factor. And everything he thinks about is getting to that 10x, because he knows that a company like Tesla is only going to be effective and scale if we can move all of these people that are in traditional gas-powered vehicles to fully electric vehicles.
So if you want to check out the Elon show, just go to moonshots.io. You can hear that. There's actually one clip that we took of Elon where he does the formula. I cannot stress how important that is. If you want to know what getting to 10x looks like, he gives it in one of his talks. He actually gives it, and we recorded it, so it was fantastic. Okay, so now we're into the second half of the show, and we're going to do a big switch now, because we're going to get into some hardcore infrastructure talk. We're going to get into the world of laying fiber. You know, the amazing thing is that we create so much data every single day that we kind of forget that all this software and all these applications are actually driven by the fact that we have nodes and hubs, glass fiber, dark fiber, all of these things running all around the world. So we're very excited to bring to you one of Holland's gurus in infrastructure. Would you please, from KPN, please welcome Pieter, Plaisier. Now, we're going to be a little bit more organized with you, Pieter, so we're going to remember to ask you for your favorite Dutch delicacy. So tell us about what you see here and what gets your vote.
My vote gets the speculaas.
Ooh,
yeah.
The spicy cookie.
The speculaas is, especially, it's not only a cookie for me, but I also used to put it on my boterham, my bread, when I was a child.
Hang on. So you have bread.
Yeah.
That's meant to be the sandwich bit, but you put a cookie in between the bread.
A lot of butter.
Oh yeah, ooh, that's good.
And then 2 slices of speculaas. Actually, you
is
also
this
have
a Pieter Plaisier creation, or is this a national pastime? Oh my gosh, you have lots of friends here.
We have
And
lots of votes in the audience.
Because of this insight, my children now they use speculoos, and that's sort of there's a
So
spread
the
like
cookie in a spread.
yeah.
And they say the Dutch are a bit weird. Come on, like who puts the cookie into a
I
spread?
don't, I'm gonna have to go get
right.
some bread and butter and put some
Yeah,
speculoos
now
in.
you're only getting half of the.
Take it home, Mike, and chat.
Yeah. Well, thank you. We've got a vote for speculaas. We've had a vote for the paper notes in the dropjes. Sorry, Ronald. You know what that's leaving? That's what. Yeah. You can blame Joost. That was all his idea. Okay. So I think it's really interesting to hear from you, Pieter. You're not only in this world of infrastructure, but part of your backstory is that working for not only the largest telco here in the Netherlands, but it would have to be one of Europe's biggest telecommunications operators, correct?
One of there are bigger because there's a lot of there are a lot of alignment between the telcos, but it's one of the largest still independent telco.
Yeah. And the special thing that you're often doing is working on these big infrastructure projects.
Yeah.
But you're also going in sometimes to companies that have been acquired by KPN. Now, this for us, as a sort of cultural moment in innovation, is dripping with all sorts of interesting ideas. The first thing is, like, in comes the infantry with their flags. Uh-oh, here comes the KPN. So we want to talk about that. But the other interesting thing is culturally how you can build bridges into new cultures and how you do that. So we've got a lot to unpack with you. But tell us about, take us to a moment when you're thinking about the first day when you walk into a new company that KPN is working with and you want to connect to the leaders in that organization. Tell us how you do it. How do you walk into a situation like this and get everybody aligned, or to use a good Dutch saying, to get all the boats sailing in the right direction? What techniques, what practices are you using? How do you do this?
Yeah, that's a very good question because that's always the challenge to get connection to the team and to the people into the company, because there's a lot of resistance and there are a lot of questions about what's going on and what will be the new future for us and for our company, and do I still get will stay within the job?
Yeah.
Of course, that's a very important question. I think it just starts with connecting. Just one-on-one connection, get conversation, give a lot of answers to the questions, and if you don't have the answer, just say that you don't know the answer yet. If you have the answer, it depends a little bit on who you speak to, but I'm also very favorite of being very transparent over that. So
you're saying we have an emergent theme, I think, for this show.
So, yeah.
It's feeling like transparency is quite big there, but let's get into it. You're walking in there and you're trying to create this transparency, Pieter, but you've basically laid up an environment where people are like, an extreme emotional situation. It's either fight or flight, right?
Yeah.
And so, you can say, hey, let's have a cuddle and get around the campfire and sing Kumbaya, but people are a little bit worried about the situation. How do you really get them to become easy and then make those connections?
I think it's also a praise on what they have achieved. So KPN acquires a lot of smaller companies and they have achieved a lot. Yeah. So you appraise that and you say that people have done a very good job, and that's one of the reasons KPN buys it. So that gives them a little bit proud, and that's important. And that you also are very keen on still get all the assets what's in that company, that you want to keep that. And the assets is of course, it's real assets, material, but it's also about people and about knowledge and about how they are acting on the market. So, but they also know that normally you go into synergies, economies of scale, and reorganizations. Yeah. Of course, you can say, we're not there yet. That's a process. So you step into the process and try to get people in that process, normally they understand. And sometimes you have to make the tough decisions, and it's better to do that quite fast.
Okay, so tough decisions. I like getting into moments of tough decisions. So
I actually have, following up on that, many of our listeners are running their own, small companies and are bootstrappers, but many of them also work for large corporations.
Yep.
How have you found, how do you work in an agile way in a big, humongous company? How can you work more like a startup and be more agile? Because I know that that's something that a lot of our listeners are struggling with is, I'm a product manager or a VP at a company. How can I get my company to work in a more agile way and be more responsive to make the right decisions?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think a lot of corporate companies, I know in the Netherlands, are dealing with that. How can we be more agile? They are looking a lot of the startup companies, the Spotifys who are using the agile way of working. And I have to say a lot of corporate companies use agile way of working. And my own experience also that we have used that agile way of working in the regional markets approach because you need the whole organization, so not only the marketing and the sales or the product management or the chain management, but also the customer service, also the retail organization, also the engineers. And you want to make, if you want to roll out fiber, for instance, in a city, then you want to get all the teams together in the approach of rolling out fiber and commercially are successful in that city. And that's a very good way to do that on the agile way of working. So every week in the same room, stand-ups, see where you are, what's your responsibility, what did you reach, what are your questions, where do we need extra help, and get everyone involved, and it works.
Okay, but this to me is like a big idea. In fact, transitioning teams from perhaps waterfall into agile sounds easy, but massively challenging because you have to give a lot of supposed certainty when you work on a waterfall basis. We have a nice big book that's about this thick, and it says every little thing that we're going to build, and you have to give that away and trust in the process. But you were saying something really interesting about getting everyone on the same page for agile.
Yeah.
Let's get into that a little bit. How on earth do you do that? And particularly on infrastructure projects, I mean, I largely work on software with a little bit of hardware, IoT stuff. Like you're talking about having a guy digging up the road and putting, how do you get everyone on the same page for that?
Well, it's in the IT world, agile way of working is common. Also within the corporate, but especially in the more commercial side, it's quite new. Personally, I just went into a sort of conference. It was at the bank and Rabobank, and then the Sutherland. That's the guy who just introduced agile way of working. He had a presentation, and there was 80% was IT and some commercial guys, and I was really amazed by his ideas and how it works. And I thought, why not for the commercial side as well? Because it's a very constructive way of working, that you're on the same page and that you make impact. And then what we already said is just starting to do it with team. Just you start to do it with one team where there's a lot of complexity around. I started with one team, and eventually with a colleague of mine. He's also here somewhere over there. We started it with eventually 8 or 9 teams working on the agile way, and just made it through as our way of working.
Okay, so you managed to go from like one unit across up to 9 different units working in the same way with Agile. Okay, and so I just want to take you back. This for everyone who's in the audience. This is the book.
Exactly.
That Pieter was talking about. It's called Scrum by Jeff Sutherland and JJ Sutherland. I thoroughly recommend it. It's called Scrum. It's absolutely the godfather of agile thinking. And it's so you
That's
actually
real.
got to hear Jeff Sutherland speak.
Yeah.
That's great. Also, I want to say though, I don't know if you know this about Jeff, but he actually was in the army and
Yeah,
implemented Scrum in the army.
In Vietnam, he was.
Yeah.
As a pilot
Yeah.
of an exact.
Now, one of the interesting things for everybody is what you won't know is that Pieter also was in the army. So
That's
you just
true.
built
Yeah,
the
yeah.
best segue for the show I've ever seen. What do you use in these big agile projects with KPN? Is there anything that you learn when you go back to your time in the military? Is there anything that you see yourself using? Making sure people turn up on time, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah.
But what lessons did you learn right back then? Because you're actually coaching cadets in the military. What's it like? Do you use any of those practices now when you're working with large teams?
The only thing is that I just ask the cadets how much will an F-16 cost, just to make them a little bit aware of the budgets going on in the army.
Yeah.
I think it's important that the people are a little bit aware of cost and cost-minded.
Yeah.
But actually, it was a long time ago for me that I was in the army. I just was a sort of a teacher, indeed, and for the cadets, just to learn some economics and internal organization. And it was a great time. But I didn't use a lot of my experience right then. On the other hand, we had a lot of different teachers of different, let's say, disciplines.
Yeah.
And the agile way of working is, of course, multidisciplinary way of working. So you could say that's something we have in common.
Great. So now I want you to imagine that all of us want to employ agile as a way of working, and we're sitting here like, how do you do it?
Yeah.
If you're only allowed to give us one set of advice to implement agile, and this really means moving to a much more dynamic way of working, very process collaborative way of working, lots of scrums, lots of sprints, all those good keywords. What's the one piece of advice that you would give to anyone thinking about it?
You just start with one team and get a good coach who is really into the discipline of the way of working of Scrum.
Mm-hmm.
So if you start with one team and a good coach, because it seems like a very flexible way of working, but in fact it's very disciplined way of working.
Right.
So you need to really work on that Scrum method.
Mm-hmm.
A coach is very helpful, so that's one advice.
Okay,
and
so hang on. So I'm deconstructing this. One small team start just with
eight people.
Eight people. Okay. Make sure you have a good coach. Okay, who really understands Scrum and Agile.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have a product owner and a Scrum Master, and you have the team ready, and then you see within 2-3 weeks you notice a lot of enthusiasm.
Wow.
And then suddenly there's a moment that people outside the teams who are not into that Scrum way of working, they are very curious.
Yes.
They want to work as well because that team is so enthusiastic. What are they doing?
Yeah.
And then you get the second team, and then you get maybe the third team, and still get the coaches and the kickoffs with the team, and we're going to do this, and then it will work because the results are coming as well.
So when you built the 9 teams, with a lot of what you were doing was, as you would build a Scrum team, you were kind of almost trying to make it contagious within the organization. It sounds like you're looking to create this new way of working, but get everyone excited about this new approach, and then almost letting the contagion spread.
Exactly. Yeah, but it's there is because I was in a domain which was a separate domain.
Mm-hmm.
In a corporate organization, in a bigger organization, you have also your the governance of an organization, and there is a moment that you have your agile way of working, and that it's linked to the normal governance. It's not and that is not what you want. That you have sort of two governance going on in the same organization.
That's confusing.
So, and then you really need to decide: are we going to do the next step with with more departments in the organization and eventually the whole organization? And that makes it quite more difficult than a startup.
Yeah, I feel like that's also for the next broadcast we do from Amsterdam. Then we have to go from one team to one organization to like 5 companies. How we kind of build this agile thing. Okay, we're going to send you out into the crowd, Chad. Grab your mic. So this is the moment where we're going to put all of you guys on the hot spot for transparency, for new ways of working in terms of agile. So who here had some aha moments when Plaisier was waxing lyrical about agile and transparency? Look at them, I think you've... Yeah.
Anybody? Yeah, we got some people back here.
Who's got some thoughts up the back there? I can see lots of people.
What did you learn or pick up from our conversation with Pieter? Anyone?
Here we go.
Please introduce yourself.
Siren. I'm also one of the fathers of Finn.
Hey.
There you go. Yeah. I think, one of the things that Pieter highlighted is there's a difference between applying Scrum and practicing Scrum.
Yeah.
I think that's a very, very important one. So basically, make sure that you're all aware of what you want to achieve, applying these methodology. And once you're all on the same page, you're good to go. I think that's an important learning.
Nice one. Thank you. Okay, everybody, would you please give your welcoming, your rewarding thank you to Pete Plaisier.
Before our last guest, I'm thinking it's time to enjoy some Dutch beer, perhaps, Mike?
Oh, do we want to take can we get 60 seconds of beer music? I'm looking at the DJ. He's having his beer already, I think. We're going to go for a 60-second beer break, but then we need everybody back here because we have the editor-in-chief of the Entrepreneur's Bible. That's right, we have Ronald from EMERCE. So you have 60 seconds to charge your glasses and be back. Ready for beer music and action. All right, here we go. Grab a drink and be back. Chad's going to do interpretive dance. No, I'm okay. I have a beer after. No, I'm okay. Yeah. And bring everybody,
Ladies and gentlemen, there's 30 seconds left until we start again.
Hallo, 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 hallo. Amsterdam. Goedenavond, allemaal. See, if I speak Dutch, it goes a lot better, doesn't it? Come on, everybody, make your way. Don't be shy. Let's try and fit everybody in. Grab a seat if you can.
Welcome to the Moonshots Live from Amsterdam podcast here at Finn's headquarters.
We are at the Finn worldwide headquarters, nonetheless. We have friends in the audience. We are very, very excited to have you all back. Yosti, can you go and bring everyone's attention to the stage? Come
join us.
Come hang out. Don't run away, everybody. Okay, so we have had 3 fabulous guests. Chad, we've heard some emerging themes. What have you got on your themes so far from Johan and the whole crew?
Yeah,
what do you got on the list?
My favorite part of unpacking entrepreneurs and innovators is these recurring themes that emerge. And I think tonight, one of the biggest ones that resonated was transparency and not being afraid to speak your mind, both as a co-founding team, but also, within the company.
Yeah.
And then also the importance of outside perspective and mentorship and coaching.
Yeah, that was big. That was big.
I think that can help foster more
Yes.
transparency if you have someone on the outside kind of looking in. Those are,
Yeah.
I think my favorite so far has been transparency.
Yeah.
That's something I think that a lot of us who are starting or running companies could really learn from.
I thought a good one was having customer as a coach, right? Having that accountability. So we are now ready to introduce to you our last guest, our very last guest. And it's really exciting because we have somebody who is a long-time television and media guru and executive. And he's the big cheese at really very much the entrepreneur's Bible here in the Netherlands. It's really the go-to, the fast company, the Wired here in the Netherlands. So I would love you all to show a big Amsterdam welcome to Ronald Voert. Okay, so Ronald, you're in the hot seat because you've got to help us close the show, bring it all together, and you've got to realize that the 3 of us are sort of the only thing between the audience and having more beer. So it's a precarious situation that you're in.
That's always a good challenge, but
Yes.
thank you for having me on the show.
Okay, thank you. So I want to ask, first of all, you're in the business of ideas. You're in the business... You don't lay glass fiber.
No.
So what's really important is that you build a business around ideas, that you inspire people. So, tough question, but how do you do that? How do you get ideas that inspire the world?
Well, before you have ideas, you must have the right people. And I think in every person, there's someone which is very creative. But you have to give them the floor, You have to give them space to grow. And I think most of the time, companies are not able to look at the person, but just at the business, and they forget about what you would like to do in your life, And really what you love. Not only about your payments or your next job, but what's in the core of your interest.
So that makes you, that puts you in a really interesting situation because not only do you need to have the mental capacity to think about what's happening in the world with technology and entrepreneurialism, but you also need to be very tuned into your team.
Yeah, that's true.
So how do you, and this is so great because what Johan was talking about is helping founders, building teams. If you look at the agile transformation, that Pieter talked about, or what Maarten talked about with coaching founders, all of this high-tech world full of data is coming back to people. And that's been a huge theme of our show, what you really bring about is this very interesting idea. Ed Catmull, who's the CEO of Pixar, talks about creating safety as the primary role that he has for great ideas to exist.
Yeah.
So now, in your channeling your inner Ed Catmull, how do we do this? You walk into the office and you want to create this environment that's focused on the people and what they're trying to achieve and helping them grow. How do you do that? How do you unlock that?
Well, if I look back to the time that I worked for television, it starts with a good atmosphere, of course, what you said, but you have to pinpoint the dot on the horizon, and you have to share your thoughts about what the product or the show in the end could be, but that there's a lot of roads to get there. And it's not a process that you do in 1 hour. It takes time. The guy John de Mol, I worked for him, as you have seen on my CV. It's very inspirational to work with this guy, but it's also mind-blowing, like, wow, shit, I have to think something within 2 hours, otherwise I get fired, or it feels like you get fired.
Were you really feeling that pressure to produce ideas that quickly?
Yeah, sometimes, for example, once I got a jurist guy, and we got a show from the States, and I got the order to make in just 24 hours a show for the Netherlands, but which wasn't that we, stole it from the other one.
Hang on, so you get the call, make me a television show in 24 hours.
Yeah.
Okay.
How do you do that?
Or it was like, we sold already 70 episodes, but it's a game show, but yeah, I told him something about this and that, but it doesn't work good now, so just make something. Well, that's the bad stories, of course, but that happens.
Yeah.
But it's really difficult to, I always say, like, if you want to create a game show, it's not difficult to do the introduction, the middle part, but the final episode, that's where that's where the crux is.
So how do you ensure that you've got the right people working in the right way to get that job done? What do you do as editor-in-chief? Tell us about some of the tactics, the behaviors that you employ that enable your people, your teams to achieve that.
Yeah.
What are you deliberately doing to ensure success?
Yeah. One thing I want to say first is, if you look at television, you look for the people who like to be creative. They don't have any boundaries. Sometimes it are the people who are on the street who you think they are almost lunatic, but they're the best one. I think you know that from the advertising industry as well. But if you look at EMERCE, when I started there 6.5 years ago, the first thing you do is look at all the people and ask them the same question. Who are you? Where you want to be in a few years? And what want you do in life? And with that in mind, you can decide if somebody is on the right track or right position or not. And sometimes you have to say, okay, you like it on the position you have, but you better move on because it's not the right track for you. And that's just profiling someone, my gut feeling.
Yeah.
I sometimes say to my wife, I don't know where I learned this, but it's the same if I have to do an interview. And for example, a few months ago with the CTO of AliExpress, I don't know the guy, I just have mailed him and I said, we want to do a cover shoot, an interview with you. And within a few minutes, he is in China. It was 11 o'clock at night, and in the Netherlands was 3 in the afternoon. And we have to become friends within just a few minutes, otherwise we have 45 minutes and then it ends up. So that's always a nice sport, to profile somebody, to become friends, and get more information than just what the press people also tell you.
Yeah.
That's not what we want to know, of course.
So do you build models of like each of your team members? Are you like calculating what they're looking for, what their hopes and dreams are? Do you feel like you've almost got like a mental library of all the dreams and hopes of your team?
Yeah. But that's, I'm passionate about communication and psychology, and media is all about those things.
Yes.
And it's also like when I started at EMERCE, we're doing print, online, and events. We're the biggest here on e-business in the Netherlands. We always say we are like the Wired or the Fast Company from here. But it's it's always about, I forgot your question now.
So, this where we're going is unlocking all of these practices within your people. You've got like this library of all of their hopes and dreams. Are you constantly checking against that? Are you constantly saying, oh, I've got to make sure Chad, I know he really wants to do this, he's motivated by this. Are you literally checking in on that library of their dreams?
Yeah, yeah. But the most important thing is that you have to look what is their biggest passion.
Yeah.
You know, we sometimes have people in the Netherlands and they write a letter like, oh, I want to work for you. I always say like, I don't care. You know, we want to have people who are passionate about the industry.
Yeah.
So you want to know the next story or the next evolution, and you really know the facts. You know, writing, everybody can write. You know, but it's about really being interested in people, in industries.
Which is interesting because finding people with passion is something that some of our other guests talked about. What are you looking, what's a sign that someone is super passionate and driven? But say you were interviewing Chad or I, what are you looking for? What's a signal that maybe some of the entrepreneurs here can be looking for when they're interviewing people? What should we be on the lookout for talented and passionate people?
You know, the method I use is I always talk business-wise, but also personally. So most of the time, like the guy from Ali, within 5 minutes he will know that I have a wife, 2 children, what their habits are, etc., to just make him feel comfortable. And I do the same with my employees. You know, it's not like, okay, I'm the boss, but it's like I have also my issues, you know, and I want to be one of them. And then, yeah, you get a connection, you know.
It's almost to me like the transparency thing is coming back again.
Yeah,
being yourself, being who you really are, and not trying to, wear a fancy tie and pretend you're the boss.
I think that's the best thing you can do because, it's the same for myself. It's like 5 years ago, it was like people saying, "Oh, what you're doing, Ronald? The market wants specialists, and you're a generalist, you know." And then there was EMERCE like, "Wow, your CV is great." You know, in about 5 years, the world will be changed again.
Yeah.
So I always say also to my children, I introduce them now, but
the two of them.
Yeah, the 2 girls. But you have to do what you love, and the world will change every day. You know, you don't know what will happen, and it's also the same if you look at our audience, our readers or visitors. You know, it's not like, oh yeah, we must be on Facebook. No. What is their mindset? What's going on?
Right.
If you know what they are thinking, then you can be ahead of the next step. It's the same with the text messages, everybody was like, no, we don't want to have that. But in the end, we're very happy with it. So it's always about, that point.
Yeah, I would love, it sounds like you're not only have to get into the minds of your own people, but being a media company, also understand what's going to resonate and be popular with people. I'm curious kind of how you go about finding the trends of topics and people and companies to profile that is kind of ahead of where the industry is. I'm curious kind of about your process and how you do that research and find
because
what's going to make EMERCE, be out there.
Because what's interesting about this question is you're the tastemaker. So how does a tastemaker
exactly
build the zeitgeist?
Yeah, it's something every minute of the day. Also in my private life, you're always looking for the next big thing. And I always say I don't like reading, but I read a lot of stuff, mostly on Flipboard and that kind of things. But it's that sense. What I said to you before, I'm a sort of digital trend watcher, and it's sort of disease almost. It's like, yeah, there's voice coming on. What can we do with voice?
Yeah.
And you try things yourselves, like Johan said before. You talk to people. You just you say to someone, well, I don't think this is going to work, and they're going to say, yeah, it's going to work. Oh, yeah, I'm great. I thought so also. But it's always like a trend watcher, and also with the mindset of our audience in mind.
Yeah.
It's what will be the impact of it, etc., and then we make content of it in several forms.
So we've talked a bit about the process of attracting and keeping talent, and what's really refreshing is in this world of data and software and startups, that it's still about the people. It's still about the way in which you interact, the way you collaborate with people. And you're doing all of this within the setting of Amsterdam. And I think it's really exciting to hear from you. What makes Amsterdam so special? Why is it that we are in a city that's full of creativity and innovation? Why is that so?
Well, one of the other guests already mentions the VOC mentality, of course, but I was raised in the east of the Netherlands, and it's not a big difference between there and Amsterdam, but I live now for 25 years over here. It's like, you know, the atmosphere. You can be yourself. You know, it's like nobody will say or blame you for something. It's like you can sort of self-employment, I say, self-development. And I think if you have several people of that in one office, you get can get creativity until big heights, you know? You know that yourself, I think, when you were working here. And also, we are a small country, you know? It's always like, oh, we are going to conquer the world, but in the end, we are just a very small country, as big as Paris. So we have to be very creative with a little bit of money.
So you think there's actually some natural constraints. I hear this story a lot that because the Dutch have always been forced into a trading mentality as a small nation, you've built bridges, virtual bridges, to the rest of the world, and that still seems, from what you're saying, to be alive today.
Yeah, but we have to, you know? It's like, if you're so small, you have to be smart again.
Yeah.
But, and I think if you look 5 years ago, when we said we are from Amsterdam, it was okay, you know, it's sex, drugs, and that kind of thing. But I feel in about, the last year, it's like, wow, cool, Amsterdam. I think it's because of the geographically place.
Yeah.
And it's just a shift, you know? It's like people see like, wow, that's a nice place. And you see that also, last night I was on the TV, there was like the tourism in the whole of Europe was going down, except for the Netherlands. And Amsterdam was not like 5% up, but more.
Yeah.
And I was like, why? Why is that? You know, for us it's normal.
Yeah.
But there's something magically or something.
Yeah, there's definitely a very magical...
Cozy as well.
It's cozy, and I think that you feel the openness culturally. You feel the openness. I always say that the greatest challenge of living in Amsterdam is that you're not expected to be anyone other than yourself.
Yeah.
But that is often the greatest challenge of all. So what I want you to help us do now, Chad, are you ready to go out into the audience? Okay, so this is where we're going to mix it up a little bit. I didn't tell Chad about this. We're going to ask the audience to tell us why they think Amsterdam is such a great city for being creative, why it's such a hub of innovation. So who has some thoughts on what makes Amsterdam so special?
Yeah, who wants to brag on your city? Come on, there's got to be someone out here. Why is Amsterdam so great? Yeah, okay, don't forget to introduce yourself.
So, good afternoon, everybody. I am the father of Joost. Frans is my name. I was born and raised up in Amsterdam, in the west side of the Amsterdam. What makes Amsterdam so special? Amsterdam has history. I heard you talking about the VOC. That's for the Netherlands very, very important. And it has so a history where we can be proud on. To come be an Amsterdammer, that you have to earn that. If you know what I mean? It's kind of a trophy. So if you want to earn that, you have to study about Amsterdam. Just visit the brown cafes.
Yeah.
Then you can meet a lot of people who have talking, people from the neighborhood, etc. That makes you rich about the history of Amsterdam. It has to do with shipyards, the haven. What means the damrak? Everybody's talking about a damrak. A rak is a place to be where you can go with your boats.
Yeah.
They putting on on the side for waiting for the next transportation, etc. This is the history of Amsterdam. And I'm still proud. I'm now living no more in Amsterdam, but still I'm proud to be an Amsterdammer.
Yay!
That's it.
Very good. All right, who else? Who else has some ideas to offer on why Amsterdam is a creative and innovation hub? Don't be shy, because Chad has been known to force people to speak. Look at him, he's a big brutal guy. Who else has got some thoughts?
Why
Yeah.
is Amsterdam so great?
Hi, it's Steven. I would also say because of the honesty of the people living there. So people, if you look strange, people will tell you look strange.
Yeah.
If you look nice, people will tell you look nice. And if you have a good idea, people will tell you you have a good idea. If you have a shitty idea, people will tell you change this and this and this, or help you to make it better.
Okay, so openness. I think there's a great Dutch saying, a true friend in Holland tells you when you have spinach on your teeth, right?
For sure, yeah.
So Joost again, I think we've been talking about corporate agility, but maybe this agile metaphor maybe even can be taken to a nationwide level. I think that as a nation we've always been forced to adjust, to be flexible, because we're not with many, so we need to be smart. So I think as a nation we're very open to trying to do new stuff, apart from a great infrastructure, apart from great levels of education, apart from the fact that we're physically quite well situated where we are. So I would like to think that as a nation we have a lot of agile characteristics.
Ooh, the first agile nation. Thank you, guys. Now, Chad, why don't you go to the lady who was the first to comment and ask her. She's got lots of ideas, I can tell. Okay.
What I think about Amsterdam?
And why is it a creativity and innovation hub?
For me, Amsterdam is really a free spirit. So there's so much energy in the city and about exploration, doing new things. Freedom, that's free soul. That's what comes to my mind.
Fantastic. All right, everybody, would you please show your appreciation from the big cheese from EMERCE, Ronald! Okay, now if you hadn't already noticed, there's plenty of beer being consumed. There's a whole rabble of people at the back of the room now. I think that's a clear sign that we need to get to a wrap on this show, Chad. What are you thinking?
Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating. And I just wanted to remind you that Mike and I do host a podcast, if you couldn't tell. Right. And you can find that at Moonshots.io. We've profiled some really great entrepreneurs and innovators, unpacking as much as we can from them to learn how we can take their practices and apply them to our own lives. And I think today we've gotten some really amazing takeaways. For me, I think that the biggest one was this idea about honesty and transparency. It seemed everyone that we've spoken to has
everyone
touched
kind of
on
got
that.
to that point.
And it seems to me to be a very Dutch thing as well. What Steven was saying, how they'll tell you how things really are.
Yeah, I love that. So what a fabulous way to kick off the night here. The night is only very young. We're super thankful to all of you for being part of the Moonshots podcast. Which episode number are we at? Is this 14? 14th episode. So we thank you very much. We want your thoughts, your comments, and your ideas. But in the true spirit of Amsterdam, the freedom of the night, it's Friday night. We're going to wrap up here for the Moonshots podcast. The DJ is cueing the vinyl, and we're ready to enjoy and celebrate something very special tonight. So everybody, thank you very much for a great show.
Thank you, Amsterdam.